Hey, what's up guys? Nate here from Protoculture. Welcome back to Sonic Academy, and today we are going to be having a little chat about how to finish tracks. Now, I've been making a living off the music industry now for 20 years. I've probably got around 300 releases and remixes under my belt over the years. So I've had a bit of experience with needing to, be effective at getting music done and finished. I've also been pretty guilty of procrastinating a lot as well, and also getting caught up in writer's block. So I'm going to share these tips that have kind of helped me over the years kind of maximize the amount of music that I get finished and really kind of manage time and stuff a little bit better to actually get projects done. I'm going to split these up into 5 tips for you guys that I really hope will help you kind of just increase your productivity and get those tracks signed onto labels. Right, so I'm not saying that you should rush your productions, but the advice I'm giving you here entails kind of being a lot more focused and focusing on what's important rather than the fiddly bits that we as producers like to fiddle with a lot of the time. A lot of the other tips I'm going to cover all kind of bleed into this concept of managing time and using your time effectively and pushing through and getting stuff done quickly. If your goal is to finish music, then you should be finishing the music and not sitting around trying to pull out the dominant harmonic out of a kick for 5 days straight. If I look back through some of my most well-received work, the ones that really kind of stood out were often not the ones that I was proud of the production, but they were tracks that I finished in like 6-7 hours, where I wasn't even sure about the track, but because I managed to capture that raw sort of feeling of this idea that I had and I got out really, really quickly, those are always the ones that kind of resonated a lot more with my fan base and people that were listening to the music. I have a rule these days now as well. If I don't finish the sort of core structure of a track in about 2 days max, I actually delete the track and I throw it out, or at least will bin it for the time being and perhaps come back to it later, but usually not. Now, that's not to say that I don't spend more time on tracks. I do spend more time on the mixes and fine-tuning, and if you count all the pre-production that goes into tracks, making presets, etc., obviously I spend a lot more time, but the sort of core work around the track, getting that musical idea from here into the DAW, needs to happen quickly and promptly without too much distraction happening for me. And lastly, the other thing, a lot of us as producers, we become so focused on the engineering side of things, and we forget that we're actually writing music. And in my experience as well, 99% of the people that are going to listen to your music don't care that you spent 100 hours perfecting your bass compression. They just don't understand that. The hook and having a successful musical idea will win every single time. So focus on getting those out rather than the production, and you'll be winning. Alright, so this kind of feeds into our first tip again. You can't really be effective at finishing tracks quickly if you're constantly fumbling around in hundreds of sample libraries, sifting through countless presets, and messing around with plugins that you don't know how to use. Take time to organize your samples. I do this loads of the time. I set aside days where I just organize things and kind of shift things around. Organize your samples into folders that make sense. Then on top of that, organize them into packs that make sense. Packs where you have sounds that you've road tested that work well. Before an album, I tend to kind of group sounds together so that I have a palette to work with rather than constantly finding new sounds all the time and just wasting time scrolling through countless hat samples that nobody's going to give a damn about at the end of the day. There's a couple of really cool tools to help you out with something like this. One which we actually covered right here on the channel, Synonym, for example, which is an AI-driven piece of software that will help you sort through all your samples. It's a really cool tool to make collections that are easily accessible so you don't find yourself getting lost in an overload of sample searching all the time. Another thing you should be doing, take time to save presets. There's a lot of stuff that we do as engineers that's repeatable between tracks the whole time. I'm not saying you should copy the sounds all the time, but have stuff like your basics saved as presets and categorized intelligently so that you can access those things quickly. It just, those little minutes that you shave off are minutes that you can be getting those ideas out onto paper. And like I said, from the beginning, the quicker you get those ideas out, the more successful they usually are. Lastly, that brings me to plugins. Now, we all love our plugins and our gear. but you have to be careful of getting overloaded with plugins. There's no sense in having thousands of plugins that you don't know how to use, because all you're going to do is you're going to be doing the same thing that you do when you're browsing through samples, is going through preset after preset after preset, not finding what you want, when you could have a synth that you know really well, maybe just one or two synths, and you'll have an idea in your head and you'll be capable of getting that sound immediately because you know how that stuff works. I'm fortunate to be in a position where I get sent a lot of software, so I have a lot of plugins installed, but even so, I make use of Cubase's excellent plugin manager to create little libraries of plugins that I access for different functions. So when I'm writing a track, I have a very much scaled down list of plugins that are accessible at any given time, right down to the stuff that I just that I always know is going to work. My favorite compression, my favorite effects, synths that I find really inspiring, that I can get a sound very quickly with. And then, if you really need that other stuff, you can always go and dig those out, but just keep the stuff that's important and that you know really well on hand. You'd be surprised how many plugins you probably own that you don't know all the little ins and outs of, and you spend some time with those, really get to know them, you'll be pretty amazed at what you can do with them. Okay, so now following on from plugins in the previous point, this is something I've been trying really hard to kind of enforce in my own workflow a lot lately, and that's this concept of playtime and work time. Work time being the time that you spend finishing tracks. You've got an idea, you've got a deadline, you've got a client, or you've got a track that you want to get out on a label. That's what you do in your work time. But it's important to schedule playtime at the same time as well. And playtime's where you get out those bits of gear that you're not really familiar with, and where you just have fun and make a whole bunch of noise. So this is the time where I do stupid experiments in virtual modulars, or just take a synth that I'm not that familiar with and just turn up the volume and have fun playing it, without any sort of goals in mind at all. Just have fun listening to the resonance of the filter. What does this ARP do? What happens if I do that? It's really important to set those moments aside for yourself to kind of do that. A lot of that kind of stuff just doesn't gel well when you're actually trying to push a track out. I've found quite a few times that I will actually have a play session that will spawn an idea that will set me off into work mode, and I'll finish a track that evening or something, just based off the ideas that I'd come up with in that play session. But I do find, splitting them apart, and then again, as we spoke about with, keeping a tidy house, record those modular sessions in your playtimes. Save those presets out, bounce samples, put them into packs, because that's really where you start building your own unique sound, that when you start finishing those tracks, you have access to all this content that you can kind of build your songs with and have an identity at the same time. So really, really important to split those two for me personally. So always, always, always stop during your production time, take a break. Now this kind of falls into two categories for me, where you might want to be getting a bit of perspective on your music. One is overcoming listeners' fatigue and just general fatigue in the studio. You need to take those breaks, get out of the studio, and reset yourself a little bit. Now, for me, that often involves, getting up to the mountain, taking a walk in the woods with the dogs, whatever floats your boat, but you need to actually remove yourself from that studio to kind of just get a fresh outlook on what you're doing. It's never healthy to be working the amount of hours that we do constantly without taking a break at all. The other category that I was mentioning is taking a break to reference stuff. And I can't tell you how important this is for me. So many times I've gone on a rampage in the studio with a really cool idea and just banged out a whole bunch of stuff within the space of 5 or 6 hours, but haven't referenced properly. And 6 hours down the line, I'll listen to a track and then realize what I've done is just complete rubbish. And I'm not saying you need to reference musical aspects of things, i.e. the arrangement, and you're not trying to copy another artist, but just to have a piece of music, couple of seconds long, where you can just get a perspective on where your production should be. It's going to save you hours down the line if you are heading in the right direction from the get-go, and it's really important to just kind of do those course corrections every now and then. For me, a tool like Metric AB, it's one of the most important plugins in my workflow. It's the first thing I load up when I start a new project. I load up a couple of tracks in a similar style or similar production that I like, and constantly, just every 30 minutes or so when I've done something new, just flick that on for a few seconds just to check, am I getting tired? Am I boosting bass too much? Am I boosting the highs too much? Am I focused in the right direction? I just find that shaves a lot of time off at the end of the day when you come around to your final mix down. Haven't backed yourself into a corner where you basically have to restart from the beginning and, sift through everything with a fine-tooth comb, trying to find all those mistakes that you made along the way. So reference, super important. Right, so the last point that I wanted to make, some people might disagree with me on this, but this is something that's always really helped me, and that's forcing myself to progress forward in a track by changing the formats of channels that I'm working on. So what I mean by that is getting to a point where I'm happy with something and then rendering it to audio. And quite often what that does, apart from freeing up resources and just making the whole process of working in a DAW a little bit more pleasant, it's kind of the same as taking a walk and taking a bit of a break. It kind of refreshes your whole outlook on a track. It also opens up a whole bunch of different editing possibilities when you are in audio. For example, chopping stuff up can be a lot easier than MIDI, for example. You're not dealing with loads of automation and so on. Another great thing about rendering to audio for me is I do this a lot more in my tracks nowadays. When I get to the end of a mix, once I've kind of got things where I want, I bounce everything to stems and I'll restart the mix again with just audio files. And it's just that sort of idea of having a clean slate with no plugins, no automation and stuff going on. It's a really great way for me to kind of just refocus on what's important in the production side of things and get volumes leveled out properly and all those little details which I might have missed when I had a massive bird's nest of a project with tons of automation and so on and so on. When I started off writing music, I didn't really have a super fast laptop with sort of unlimited undo capabilities. Initially, when I started off, I had a MIDI sequencer on an old computer. I had a hard disk recorder, an old Roland VS880, and a couple of synths. So you were super limited by the fact that you didn't have this endless editing capabilities that you have nowadays on modern DAWs. So what it taught you to do, and there was something great about producing this way, it taught you to kind of really formulate the ideas in your head before you get them out. You didn't have the luxury of coming back to edit them because you'd fill up 8 tracks on the hard disk recorder, you'd have to bounce those down to 1, and then you'd fill up the next 7, bounce those down to 1, fill up the next 6, and so on until you'd reached your track limit. So you were always kind of formulating in your head, making sure that your ideas were solid and kind of really gaining that confidence to bounce the stuff down, because it was quite a mission to deal with it after the fact. So you had to be confident in laying those ideas out and getting them onto paper and then, just moving ahead with the track. And I found that's really beneficial for me nowadays as well. It's so easy to get caught up in this endless loop of editing stuff and changing stuff and, the grass is always greener kind of thing, where you should just be pushing ahead and get those ideas out as quickly as possible onto paper so that you can wrap up those tracks. Anyway, so that brings me to the end of my top 5 tips for finishing your music. Like I said, these are things that personally I have really helped me in my productions. I'm hoping some of you guys get something good out of this as well, and it helps you to sort of really get in control of finishing your music and overcoming things like writer's block, etc., etc. Do these work for you? If you have other suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear about them. Otherwise, I will catch you guys soon right here at Sonic Academy. Cheers.
Thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate all the support from you guys. If you love this video, then smash a like, and if you want to be notified about new videos, hit the subscribe and notification buttons. Peace!